Container bus to join onward Master at land, chapter 61. The man blazing across the world. Now that looks fun. Kidomaru remarked in amusement as he watched the newcomers attack both the annoyingly proud White Fang members and the explosive Uchiha representative in a single speed. He must have a pretty damn good semblance if he can teleport from up there, attack two men and on opposite sides of the area, and then appear in the middle without anyone able to react. It was so high level compared to the newbies that it was just wasn't fair, and he loved that. If he was being honest, there was nothing more he wanted to do than perch himself on a nice slope wall and watch the carnage commence. Sadly, there was a job to be done, and he was the man to do it. The spider faunus quickly traversed the storage units and machinery that populated the ring. He jumped from wall to wall before pressing his hands against the metal and sticking to it. The dark-skinned faunus crawled along the wall while he heard screaming and gunshots everywhere. Groups separated from both White Fang and Uchiha forces to face off against each other across the ring. The wild faunus continued to unload the weapons randomly in hopes of hitting their targets, while the outnumbered Uchiha focused on cover and helping any workers still caught in the crossfire. The Uchiha were burdening themselves with unnecessary rescue, while the White Fang were so inept that they were discredited to his race. It pained him to just watch and not get the chance to jump in and show them how it was done. But the job came first. Kidomaru crawled down towards the central hub of the ring before pushing off the wall and swimming into kick open the door. He jumped inside and looked around to see a room completely abandoned by his workers. Apparently they had seen the panic going on outside and booked it to the exit. That made his job easier, but less entertaining. Okay, where are you? He walked around the control panel and projector screens looking for his target. Kidomaru blew a low whistle in his boredom while the chaos echoed from outside. He stopped in front of the control panel with a dock. Oh, there you are. Kidomaru drew out the scroll and pushed it in place. Now, I want to say this won't hurt, but to be honest, I got no idea what that sexy psycho bitch is planning, so put it in. He stepped back and smirked, and cross your fingers. Kidomaru looked around and deflected with disappointment at the lack of any immediate action or changes. He frowned while looking over the room. If this was a prank, I'm gonna lose my... He was cut off as every terminal and computer screen suddenly turned on together. The spider faunus looked around in surprise and watched as the image of a queen chess piece showed up on the screens before flickering away. He stared at them in silence before he heard the sounds of something loud and metallic scratching against each other. He looked out the window and spotted some of the rig's equipment coming back online and started moving remotely. Kidomaru grinned mischievously. Cheat codes, a lady after my own heart. Hunting. Minato's stood between the two groups as they hesitated and sized him up. The blonde huntsman eyes panned to the White Fang as they helped Harlan back to his feet, but he yanked his arms away from them. Besides him, the young woman in the mask didn't fret like the other faunus and simply watched him carefully. For whatever move he made on the other side, the young blonde Uchiha had picked himself up and massaged the spot he had been kicked. The Uchiha side had fewer members, but was far less settled by his sudden appearance. He could tell by the way they held their weapons that they at least had some training, and three of them seemed more combat oriented than the rest. They would prove for the faunus. One White Fang member broke rank and pulled out his gun before firing it at the huntsman. Bullets and sparks shot out everywhere in an attempt to riddle the man with holes. The faunus covered his ears and the Uchiha tried to avoid any stray bullets. The White Fang member was knocked unconscious as the fist went flying up in his chin and knocked him off of his feet in an instant. The other faunus reacted quickly when they realized their target had disappeared again and breached their formation. Minto jumped up and slammed his foot into the nape of one terrorist before he vanished again. A yellow flash of light appeared over a large faunus head as Minto dropped down on his shoulders and pinned him to the ground. Someone pointed him out and rallied the fellow terrorists together to charge him. The blonde huntsman dove across the ground towards them before teleporting, reappearing by their legs and yanking one leg out. They toppled over and were pinned to the ground with an axe kick to the back. He snapped back up on his feet and spun around, throwing three-pronged knives in every direction and either lodging them in gun barrels or sticking the hands of the ones aiming them. Before he could grab more knives from his pockets, he was surrounded and charged on all sides. Minato grabbed the arms of someone reaching for his shoulder and pulled them in, slamming his elbow into their mask and flooring them in an instant. He spun on the spot and knocked through more fawness down with a swing hook kick to the temples. The blonde huntsman snapped back up and jumped back from a desperate swing kick from a large man with antlers on his head. He yelled at the top of his lungs and swung his fist down for Minato's head, but the blonde slipped into his guard when he was exposed. His fist rapidly jabbed and struck over the massive elk's body before finishing it with a kick to the knee. The larger man toppled to the ground and looked up in time to catch Minato's fist to his jaw. Someone grabbed him before he could disappear again, but Minato jumped off another approaching terrorist chest and got enough room to look up. He reappeared in mid-air over the heads of the Uchiha. His eyes narrowed down at his new targets as the fondness he dragged with him screamed in panic. That altered the vigilantes who looked up in shock and reached for the weapons. Minato course-corrected and dropped on top of someone and rolled off their unconscious form. The moment he was on solid ground, his hand shot up and drew a knife in each hand. He yelled and knocked back at the swords around him in a shower of sparks. Minato started to knock the blade back with remarkable quickness as he caught the edge of the swords and knives in his prongs. The Uchiha tried to fight back but failed to block against the blonde blur that weaved through their ranks so easily. The blade snapped off from the hilts with ease as he swept people off their feet and floored them in seconds. The huntsman's hands whipped out knives in every direction and withdrew them from his vest in rapid succession. Minato's assault was finally halted when he spotted yellow sparks to the side. His instincts flared and he teleported to the side in time to avoid the yellow lightning arc in his way. The moment he reappeared, he had to jump back and somersault away as a layer of pink crystal started to spread out over the ground and approach him. It snapped and cracked and jolted forward before bursting upwards with sharp edges threatening to skewer anything in its path. The blonde man dashed out of its path and slid on the ground before dashing up at his feet. And his foes, Gurren, Didro yelled at the blue-haired assassin. Take care of that asshole for us. Me and Rega will handle the big bastard over there. When did you get to start barking out orders? Gurren snarked before her eyes narrowed and she ran after Minato. The blonde quickly jumped to his feet and sprinted around the corner as Gurren charged after him. She heard the roar before leading the charge forward and rushing the white fang while they recovered. She wanted to help fight against the big fondness. They knew had terrifying powers at his disposal, but right now she knew the more pressing matter was stopping the teleporting third party from interfering. Gurren slid across the corner and spotted her target standing squarely between the rig control building and some frightful containers. Although he didn't have anywhere to run, the unbothered and sharp look in his eyes said that didn't matter to him. The assassin narrowed her eyes and lowered her hands, reaching for the pieces of crystal that crept up by her feet and stretched out into her hand. Her eyes widened when she felt a rush of heat, and she raised a large wall of crystal to hide behind him. She ducked underneath in time to avoid the stream of blue fire that nearly roasted her. The blue flames wafted all over the top of the barrier and cooled down to orange and red before disappearing altogether. Gurren stood up from behind her defense wall and looked down at the slightly melted front of her wall. That's a cool ability. Gurren looked up to see a fondness surrounding the corner to join them. Her position locked Gurren between her and the blonde huntsman that had crashed upon him. The masked blonde woman stepped forward as the blue flames continued to flow off the back of her head. You have much better control of your semblance than most of the people I meet back home, me included. I'm hoping to fix that with some actual field experience. The flames died off her hand. I hope to get some of that from fighting you too. That's fine, Minato said as he stepped forward, casually drawing two knives from the sleeves on his back. One was light blue and left a flow of steam coming off of it from contact with the air. The other faint yellow, which cracked and sparkled in his hands. While you earn some experience from the feat, I have some questions to ask you too, and you will accommodate. Hunting, Riga, take him. The towering mercenary charged the horse fondness that faced them without a moment's hesitation. The horse seemed to freeze, being suddenly charged but raised his arms and blocked the pronged sword with his bladed gauntlets. Itachi had warned them about the fondness that were shot in their aura and just how difficult they could be to handle. But he also advised them that the best chance to beat them was when they weren't shrouded and they were nothing more than people. Rhaegar pressed forward and swung his blades rapidly. Han was pushed back, forced forced to raise his guard and block the onslaught of swings and strikes with his bladed gauntlets as best he could. He grit his teeth and activated his weapons as the blade started to spin around his arms. Han roared and waved his arms in close lines to force Rhaegar to stay away from him. The green-haired swordsman dug underneath the large limb and blades to come into Han's bubble. He thrusted his sword down and caught the horse's shin with one of his prongs. The noble guard let out a pained cry and dropped to one knee before raising his arms to block the downswing to his head. With a roar, Han summoned his strength and pushed Rhaegar's sword back in a bright display of sparks as he forced himself up on his feet. But Han was knocked face down by a powerful explosion going off point blank on his back. Han hissed and looked back to see Daedra charging him with his palm, igniting and exploding every second. He threw his hands out and completely covered Han in a flurry of explosions and smoke. "This is for Vecchio, dickhead. Our friends will be waiting for you in hell." Daedra screamed at the top of his lungs and released explosion after explosion on the defenseless Faunus. Embers and smoke rushed through the entire area and spread through the openings and passed over the ring floor. White Fang and Uchiha were forced to cover their mouths and ears from the rush of smoke that was washed over them. Daedra's explosions came to a slow halt as he propped himself up with his hands on his knees, panting and hungry for air after his exertion. He narrowed his eyes and tried to spot a figure in the smoke, but it was just so thick it was impossible to see through. But it was blown away with a sudden rush of steam. Daedra nearly stumbled back from the force of it, as well as the smoke around him vanished and revealed the man at the center of it. And some of Han's clothes were singed, and he looked to have some burns on his skin, but nothing else from the overwhelming explosions he tanked him. The horse Faunus slowly turned around to glare at the blonde behind him, revealing his hand coated in milky white aura. He gently placed it on the ground and then pushed his hand through the concrete like hot butter. "Move!" Rhaegar called out. Daedra had already jumped backwards and propelled himself even further with an explosion to gain some distance. But Han whipped his arm and tore out a chunk of cement that shattered and went flying in pieces. They pelted Daedra over his body as the large horse stood back up on his feet. His eyes turned to Rhaegar as the aura around his arms spread over his body and illuminated him in a white glow. Rhaegar's eyes narrowed at the different shade of aura over the glowing figure's eyes that was on him. Han disappeared in a white blur, and Rhaegar dove to the side on instinct. It was the right choice to make as the horse reappeared from his burst of speed and drove his hands through the ground. The swordsman once stood on. His fist tore through the rock and made a trench as he stomped his foot to slow down. He slid to a halt and looked back. Ha! Rhaegar brought his sword down over Han's head and knocked it aside. The former mercenary persisted and struck the massive aura-clad body again and again. Han's body bent and flew with each swing as the green-haired man roared and put all his strength into his attackers. One of his swings came to an abrupt stop. And he looked up in shock. Han had caught one of his swords by the blade and stared down at the mercenary with contempt. Not injured or even wounded by the assault he had taken, Rhaegar's blade shook in his hands, and as Han's grip grew tighter and tighter, the horse squeezed and yanked down as he snapped the top off and tossed the point aside. Shoes on the other foot now. What happens next? Same thing that usually happens. Rhaegar shrugged. He ducked under Han's sudden jab and slid into the large Faunus' body. He struck Han's ribs and moved behind his back when the horse tried to retaliate. He came up around Han's other side, and before the horse could turn around, he stabbed his broken sword deep into the horse's armpit. He didn't break at the aura surrounding it, but Rhaegar followed through by channeling his shock into his broken blade. The effect was immediate as Khan let out a panicked cry and shook from the sensation. Bolts of electricity jumped off his body before he forced his arm out and made Rhaegar jump back before he could fall into his grasp. Even so, Han's body seemed stiff and shaky from the shock he just took as Rhaegar fell into his stance. Even when things look bad, persist! Daedra leapt up and planted his hands on Han's head before releasing a powerful explosion that floored the Faunus. The blonde landed by his comrade's side and smirked. Looks like he was giving you some trouble. I thought I'd jump in and save your ass. No need to take me. And here I thought those rocks that put you out for the count. Couldn't be impressed. Shut up. Theodore raised his guard and prepared himself as the horse lifted himself up with a shake of his head. The Uchiha tensed their muscles and focused their attention on the faunus, who stared them down. He pressed his feet into the ground and reared back to rush them. Theodore released an explosion that blocked him and Rhaegar from view as they jumped aside to avoid the faunus' powerful dash. Hans slid to a stop and turned around as Theodore and Rhaegar pursued him. Han blocked the initial swing of Rhaegar's blade and jerked aside as his broken sword lunged for his head. Electricity still running up the metal end, jumping off when he got closer. He gritted his teeth from the shock and tightly sensation that ran along his face and threw a punch for Rhaegar. The mercenary skipped back and left the horse open as Theodore leapt through the air with his hands and semblance at the ready. Han roared and threw a punch at the blonde flying towards him to the air. Theodore smirked and released an explosion behind himself that propelled him forward and over the loose fist before it could connect him. He used one hand to push off Han's other appendage and landed a quick kick against the faunus' head before flipping over and landing behind him. The bomber immediately released a pair of explosions against the back of Han's knee and watched the massive man topple over. Han let out a guttural growl after Uchiha's continued to escape and the attacks constantly landed on him. He watched the two weaker men continue to circle and avoid his reach with their greater skills and experience. His mind thought back to the students he had fought in the forest near the beacon and how they held him back, not with sheer power but with skill and ability alone. And just remembering their cackling and jeering about it infuriating him beyond all recognition. They just slipped by his side and released an explosion over the faunus' side. Han retaliated and swung his arm out to catch him, but the Rhaegar attacked his other side. When you ignore the aura and your size, the green-haired swordsman grabbed Han's arm and turned it in a natural angle. The massive horse was forced to move and flip over before his arm popped out. He slammed to the ground and growled. I finally noticed just how slow you fight. Guess all the power doesn't make up for. Han roared and charged forward like a bullet while Theodore and Rhaegar dodged again. But this time Han continued his dash past them and slammed bodily into the base of a rig before power crane. The dent in the machine support caused it to shake and topple over. The two faunuses, the two Chiha, were forced to separate it as the crane cut them off from each other. Rhaegar looked ahead and quickly raised his guard, but was blown off his feet from the cargo freight thrown his way. Theodore called out to his comrade before looking back at the faunus. If I hear one more person comment about how I fight, I am not going to be happy. Bastard! Let's make this perfectly clear to you, Uchiha. Han stalked forward, his gait strong and menacing as the blonde man raised his guard. I may not fight as well as you or some of those wannabe hunters, but I do not need to. I can punch it, I can kick it, and at the end of the day, if that's enough for me to knock you down and kill you, then that's fine by me. I might not be as elegant, Han clenched his fist, but you lot have been running away from me this whole time, so you know it as well as I do. Shut up! Maybe I'm not the one out of my league here, huh? Shut up! Theodore charged forward and blinded Han with his explosion. The blonde ran through the smoke and dropped to his knees to avoid the swings the noble guards threw out on reflex. He came up on the horse's side and aimed his palm at his head, only for Theodore to nearly be knocked back from the intense rush of steam Han shot off of his body. Theodore tried to cover his eyes but gasped and gagged as the faunus awkwardly slammed his shoulder into the blonde's chest from the current position. It was hard enough to send the explosive fighter flying off his feet and roll over the ground. Plus, I guess you haven't realized, Han scoffed as Theodore wheezed and lifted himself off the ground. I get better each time I fight too. Hunting, if you are new to this, then I think you should consider your life choices, Gordon warned. The white-veiled woman slowly stalked forward as the air around her seemed to shimmer from the heat coming off of her body. The blue-haired fighter made sure to keep her distance and stepped back in time with her approach. This resulted in the three of them spaced out in a triangle with enough room to look at each other carefully. The assassin took her attention off the huntsman for a moment and looked to the faunus. Leave now and consider this a fun little adventure adventure before you do something that might ruin your life. You're worried about my life, the dark blonde woman scoffed. Now that's a surprise. I thought you'd be more concerned about yourself considering the circumstances. I'm concerned about something stupid you might do and how I'll have to respond, because make no mistake, I will retaliate. Girl narrowed her eyes, and you will be hurt if I do. Now turn back now and stop this before you go any further. The faunus woman narrowed her eyes behind her mask before shaking her head. Sorry. The nails on one hand started to extend further from her fingers. But I will not go back to what I was before. She swept her hand as several lines of fire flew towards Gordon, summoning another wall of crystal and ducking underneath it. The white-fanged tourist then turned to the blonde man and released a stream of fire from both hands that overwhelmed the huntsman. Everything in front of her was roasted in a swarm of blue flames. After a few seconds, she lowered her hands and looked at the heated and melted metal of the rig her flames bathed over. She didn't spot a church corpse or even a man writhing in pain from the heat. My fire's strong, but not that strong. Don't undersell yourself. That was quite impressive. Her eyes widened and she threw a panicked fist behind her. Minato slammed the pommel of his knife into her wrist and then grabbed her shoulder. The faunus yelped in pain before she was slammed to the ground and pinned there with a hand to her neck. Minato waved his blue knife over her hands before she could summon any flames. The cat looked up in shock at the ice that covered her hands and then started to struggle as he did the same over her feet. Wait here. Minato casually stepped over the woman thrashing around and yelling on the ground. He stalked towards the small wall of pink crystal that protected the woman behind it. Gurren leapt out from behind her shoulder and landed on top of it before whipping her hands out towards the huntsman. Shards of crystal sprouted out over the ground and grew out to attack Minato. Gurren jerked back when the blonde suddenly appeared in front of her without pause. The assassin reached down and broke a piece of the crystal off in each hand before jumping away to get some distance. Minato appeared in front of her again, and she raised her broken piece up to block the swing of his knife. Sparks flew and pieces of pink chipped out her shards, but Gurren persisted, fighting back against Minato's ruthless barrage of swings. The assassin's heightened reflexes and skills from years of fighting protection her from the storms of strikes, but she wasn't sure for how long. With each attack, she swore she got slower, while his knives got faster, and while he was straining to keep up, he was comfortable pressing on. Gurren gritted her teeth before slamming her foot down and creating spears of crystal under Minato's feet. The blonde leapt over the spires of pink crystal and kicked Gurren across the jaw. The Uchiha woman dropped onto the crystal she summoned while Minato stood over her. The pink rocks that cracked under her hand as Gurren whipped back and sent several shards flying at her attacker. Minato jumped a few feet back and knocked the shattered pieces away with his knives. When the barrage was ended, Minato lifted one shattered piece of pink rock up on his feet before kicking it up. When it came up in front of him, he smacked it with his blue knife and sent it flying, covered in ice and shaped as sharp as icicles. Gurren braced herself as the icicles bounced and broke against her aura. The assassin yelled and slammed her hands down as her crystal burst from the ground. She slammed her hands on the base of the pink structure and watched them shatter and fly at Minato like a rain of blades. The assassin watched the huntsman easily weave and parry the flying pink shards and rose a wall of pink crystal that her and the blonde attacker, effectively blocking her from his sight. Damn! Minato looked over the wall crystal that blocked him from his target and clicked his teeth. She didn't know it and was probably just doing what she could to defend herself, but she had effectively cut herself away from him, and now he couldn't follow. He could teleport up on top of the crystal wall and look for a clear view from there, but something told him he was already trying to escape his breath, to escape his reach. Hopefully she hadn't figured out how to combat his semblance yet, and he still had the advantage over the fight, but right now he couldn't waste time thinking about it. Because the area had steadily started to get hotter, the huntsman slowly turned around and stared at the blue aura-clad figure across from him. Her shoulders were hunched, and he was sure if the aura wasn't concealing her face, she would be staring him down with the coldest death glare he could imagine. She hadn't attacked yet, but the heat wafting off of her body unconsciously was still amazing. The cat faunus tried to restrain herself. If you were trying to humiliate me, then you succeeded. You also succeeded in royally pissing me off. I'm not interested in demeaning or humiliating you. I did that hoping you would stay down and out of this fight. because I can tell just from looking at you and listening to how you boast that you aren't accustomed to fighting. The woman showed the slightest flinch at his observation. I wanted to avoid hurting you if I could. Don't act like you know me. I don't know you, but I can sympathize with you more than most. Minato stepped forward. You probably found yourself terrified about your power, your semblance, and aura different from everyone else and everyone around you thinking the same thing. Some people were scared and some tried to shoo away, but then there were those that were interested in utilizing you and your talents. Shut up, she snarled. Don't try to empathize with me. You're right. I don't come here to spare empathy. Minato raised his colored knives. I'm here for answers. The cat fauness growled and chambered her hands at her sides. The blue fire started to gather and swell in her palms before she thrusted them out. Blue balls of fire launched out from her hands in a beeline towards Minato, who stood his ground. He whipped his blue fire. He whipped his blue knife out and created some ice shards that met the fire and created a rush of steam. Minato charged out of the steam like a yellow blur. The White Fang members growled and aimed her hand at him. A powerful stream of blue flames burst out of her hand towards Minato before he made a sharp turn. The blonde huntsman stomped on the cargo containers and ran up the wall as her blue flames followed. He looked over at another wall and of freights and in a yellow flash appeared over them. The horror-clad fauness looked around for him desperately before spotting him above her. Before she could fire at him again, he teleported and dropped on top of her. The fauness pushed him off and tried to roast him again. As he created another barrier of ice to protect him, he dashed out from around it and circled her as she released blast after blast. Minato leapt over a burst of blue flames and spiked the yellow knife. The dust knife started collecting energy through its path and looked like a lightning bolt towards the cat. The noble guard tried to protect herself, but the pain of pins and needles pelted her body mercilessly. She dropped backwards and twitched on the ground from the painful sensation and that permeated through her aura. Minato stepped over and picked up his knife. Where is Danzo? I don't know. I don't know that name. I don't believe you. Minato shook his head. I'm not sure if you just follow him or for a chance to make a change, or if you truly believe in his cause, but he is not a man worth following into the fray. The woman hissed through the pain and tried to lift herself up. Where are you people located? I'll never tell. Minato let out a disgruntled sigh at her response. Maybe all noble guards were just born ludicrously stubborn. The blonde thought about holding her down and waiting until the Atlas forces finally showed up to take her in, but he spotted something in the corner of his eyes and it chilled down his back. He turned around and swatted a piece of ice out of the air before they could hit him. He jumped to the side again and he felt awkward and he felt warmth on his back and missed the steam of blue flames that nearly fried him from behind. Gorin was forced to block and protect herself from the flames before she jumped and landed back on the ground. Shards started flying out from her sleeves for both Minato and the fauness. Minato blocked against them, while the cat fauness could only shield herself as they broke against her aura. Her hand lashed out and flames poured over the area. Gorin raised the crystal spire in front of her that split the flames while Minato flashed up on top of a tanker. The cat gathered her flames around her and released them everywhere with a furious roar. The metal was heated up to red and white from the sheer intensity of her fire. Ha! Gorin leapt on top of her melted pink spire and summoned a dozen more as footholds between her and the noble guard. The blue-haired assassin spiked her shards at the terrorist as she threw fireballs at her leaping form in return. Gorin kept leaping off the platform she created and attacked her target from all angles. They broke or even melted against the heat coming off the fauness's body as she tried to catch in the Uchiha. While she evaded the blue flames, her eyes dipped down and saw the ground had finally started to cool off. The noble guard slammed her hands together and released a mighty burst of flames. At the assassin, Gorin leapt off her perch and over the flames before landing behind the fauness. She slammed her foot down and summoned a giant spire of crystal that grew under the cat's feet and sent her flying through the air. Two long, thin shards grew up near her feet, and she snapped them off before yelling, "Come down here, now!" Now! Gurren spiked the pink javelin up through the air and watched it shatter, missing Minato's head by just an inch as he dropped down and sprinting across the ring. Gurren waved her head out and created several lines of crystal to catch his feet. Minato leapt over them and teleported to the other side of the space. The Uchiha assassin slammed her foot down and erected several walls between her and Minato. The blonde huntsman paused just short of reaching the walls and narrowed his eyes. He slipped his finger into the ring of the pommel and started to spin his sky cutter around. It glowed faintly yellow, and electric sparks started discharging off of it. Gurren yelled as the walls cracked and shards of sharp pink crystal flew through the air. Minato dove into the rain of shards without pause. A yellow glow followed with every swing of his knife as he cut the projectiles out of the air. He stepped around and avoided spires erupting around his feet and charged Gurren. She spun the long pieces of pink rock in her hands before raising it in a guard. Minato pounced on her but disappeared in a yellow flash before he reached her. Gurren spun around and blocked his knives before they hit her. They separated before dashing in and swinging their weapons at blinding speeds. Gurren blocked and swatted away Minato's strikes and swung low to sweep his leg out beneath him. He leapt over it and struck out with a kick but shattered the crystal staff in half. But Gurren just gripped the two parts instead and wielded them like sticks instead. Crystal caught against knife as Gurren pushed against her foe. Why are you doing this? You know why I'm here. You heard me the first time. Minato calmly answered. Give me Tachiuchi's location. Why? Why do you need him? Because he needs to answer for what he has done. For what? Gurren disentangled and pressed the huntsman desperately. For fighting, for trying to stop all the suffering, for standing up against the White Fang when none of you or your kind would. The assassin's rage bubbled over, and she gained the upper hand against the hunter. Itachi Uchiha is the man we promised to follow to the end of our days. He is the man I know will save us, and I will not surrender him to you. Minato swung down sharply and shattered the remains of the shards in her hands. Before she could react, Gurren was tackled to the ground and slammed on her back. The yellow knife was stabbed into her collar and pinned her to the ground, stopping her from moving and letting a faint shock run through her body. Don't try to vindicate him or yourself by acting like you are the heroes protecting everyone. You aren't that noble. Minato pinned Gurren's chest to the ground and hovered just over her face. You haven't been stopping the White Fang. You've been meeting them and retaliating in kind. You're responding to their escalation of violence with violence of your own, hunting them down during their assault and attacking them. But your team is small, and instead of taking out chunks of their forces, all you've done is show them that they need to be even more prepared and more violent during every attack. Gurren tried to free herself, but Minato pinned her again and held the blue knife over her to deter any further resistance. You have done some good for the people attacking during these raids, but don't delude yourself into thinking it's for a noble cause. You and all your comrades are only throwing your lives into the fray because you have a death wish. You wanted to die in a blaze of glory, and this was the perfect excuse to do so, to go out with meaning, to die for a cause, but you know it wasn't ever going to mean anything, because not once did you believe that your forces would be enough to stop the White Fang. Gurren stared up at Minato in silence with a conflicted expression, and she froze as he whispered. She didn't even fight back as he pulled Skycut out of her collar and back in his grip. I wanted Itachi Uchiha because he waged the war and endangered my family. He attacked my son and his friends and used this war against the White Fang to justify that. He attacked the one I loved. Blue flames raged as tongues and pillars of fires raised through the air. The noble guard swelled in heat as he charged. Die! Minato spiked the blue knife backwards without even even looking. It shattered against the aura-clad furnace and covered her in a glacier of ice. Minato glared down at Gurren. So, I'm going to make sure he is stopped. Gurren bared her teeth even as she couldn't muster the strength to push herself up. Minato was ready to apprehend the blue-haired assassin, but paused when he heard the terrible sound of metal slowly scraping against metal. He and Gurren both looked up to see a crane had powered up and slammed itself into a pair of cargo freighters. It slowly pushed them over the edge until containers after containers slammed into the rig's floor and snapped open. The vials and crystals shattered inside, and dust flooded the air. A myriad of colors filled the air and made it nearly impossible to breathe without taking some powdered element into the lungs. Minato looked around in shock and confusion. He saw the ice prison holding the noble guard start to melt, both from the inside and outside forces. His eyes widened. No! The glacier burst open with a rush of blue flames, and they ignited the dust. All hell broke loose. Hunting, Ha! I take it back. I'm so glad I came today. Kitamura clapped with excitement as the air ignited with fire, ice, lightning, wind, gravity, and every other form of energy that filtered through the air. He saw the rush of elements and power that started to bear down on the control room he was in, and he sighed. He looked down at the scroll and saw the chess piece had disappeared, and the access to the machinery probably fried from the sudden rush of elements across that platform. He picked it up before slipping it in his pocket. Plain unfair and cheating. I'd fall in love if I knew she wouldn't smoke me. Hunting, Rega! Did gagged in the smoke and other elements that filled the air as the rig's platform descended into a hell of fire, ice, and everything in between. He called out for a first comrade after their fight with the horse suddenly came to an end with the explosion. He spotted his sword-wielding companion struggling to find his bearings in the smoke as the blonde came to his side. Rega! The green-haired man flinched from the contact, but once he realized it was his partner, his relief poured into his face. We have to find the others. Cohen! The former mercenary coughed, but pointing in one direction and stumbled towards it. She was over there. That's where it all erupted. Both men tried to run as fast as they could, but struggled to find their equilibrium. They passed the corner and arrived in the area the dust explosion had occurred, and they were covered in a thick smoke cloud of heat, with lightning striking inside of it, and spires of ice rising into the sky around the entire area. They even passed by the shattered remains of freights hovering in the air from the displaced gravity. There went into a mad dash towards the crystal cocoon on the far side of the former clearing. Rega slammed his fist repeatedly against the pink mineral until it shattered and revealed the nearly unconscious woman inside. Curran, you hear me? Rega helped the groaning woman up to her feet and pulled her out gently. You with me? Come on, you crazy bitch. Listen to the sound of my voice. Hard not to, asshole. We gotta get out of here. Didra called out the swordman as he pulled her over his shoulder and helped her walk. Contact everyone. Tell them to evacuate. Faunus! The former assassin pointed over to the side as she spotted an unconscious blonde Faunus lying on the ground. One of them. Rega, the swordsman seemed to have a reservation with doing anything but evacuating the rig and its volatile state, but even he could see the golden opportunity presented with an unconscious member of the White Bang that could change like that. He warily stepped up to grab her, but the ground in front of him cratered from the impact of the horse landing between him and his fellow noble guard. The Uchiha staggered backwards and started making their way out when they realized they didn't have a chance of fighting a massive fighter in their current state. Han bellowed out, "Grab her and get out of here now!" Sir, the hostages, round them up and get moving. The Faunus started to bodily pull the unfortunate workers that had been caught by them along. Han threw his hand out. If the Uchiha follow them, make sure they see one we have. We can still. Han watched in frozen shock as yellow flashes appeared and disappeared around his followers in a matter of seconds. Their bodies went flying or dropped to the floor as the captured workers screamed and ran as fast as they could. Han watched as his forces were dropped in a matter of seconds before his sight was completely blocked by the blonde huntsman that landed on his shoulders and chest. Han suddenly found himself falling from the air as Minato kicked off of his chest. The horse couldn't find any of his strength while he fell through the air and bounced off a floating freight and an ice before slamming into the ground. His aura protected him from suffering any serious damage, but even he felt the stinging pain running through his body from the heavy impact. Another yellow flashed appeared in front of him. Are you going to give me what I want? I have nothing to say. Han buried his hand into the ground. To human like you! He tore out the ground and threw it at Minato, who simply sidestepped the charred concrete. Minato threw Sky Cutter and slipped through Han's wing into the horse's chest. He hissed but took the attack in stride before following after the speedy blonde. Han leapt after Minato with mighty steps and slammed his fist into the ground with every spot he saw Minato standing in. Lightning crackled overhead and flames raged to the side as the two combatants continued their exchange. Han was sure he could crush the blonde if he could get his hands on him, but the speedy bastard evaded his reach and cut him with lightning dust weapon every time he got close. Han yelled and released a burst of steam off of his body that blew Minato away, but the huntsman effortlessly corrected in the air, landing in a crotch against an icicle and leapt off towards the horse. Another blindlessly fast cut was left over his chest and made Han stumble back. Enough! Han made a mad dash across the ground and slammed into Minato's chest. The blonde huntsman went flying off of his feet from the force of the bull rush, but despite the pain going through his body, he still turned and spiked the Sky Cutter in Han's chest. The dust knife exploded in a massive discharge of electricity with the noble guard in the center of it. A few seconds later, after the discharge ended, Han dropped to his knees with all his aura drained and a white shimmer faded from his body. My aura. First time you've ever been drained, huh? Guess that's a new experience for you. Minto limped forward, but shoved the pain down and stood in front of the injured terrorist. You can't fight back anymore. Resist, and I will not hesitate to hurt you. I might be out of aura, but my brothers and sisters are still surrounding this place, and you can't fight them all with how injured you are. Han looked at the burns and marks and bruises that showed Minto after all the fighting and getting caught in the explosion. Han yelled, "You won't stop us! I could try, and I might just be able to, but I think I'll trust them to carry the brunt of it." The hum of multiple bulkheads and airships coming into the air started to emanate through the air. The smoke coming out from the rig was so thick it was impossible to see clearly, but some silhouettes started to faintly appear through the smoke. "Atlas is here for all of you," Minto stayed quietly. Explosions started to occur more frequently on the rig's surface as more cargo freights started to explode. Minto glared down coldly. "You have nowhere left to run. Give up and surrender to me." Han ponted and hung his head. "If I give up, would you save me? I will take you away from here safely before this whole rig comes down. And then if you can save me." Han looked aside. "What about them?" Minto looked over and his eyes widened in horror when he saw the former hostages trying to make their way through the wreckage and to the escape route. He had been so focused fighting he forgot about the hostages. Han kicked off the ground and ran in the opposite direction to escape. He was still in Minto's line of sight, which meant he could still reach him with teleportation, but the rig didn't have long. The smoke was everywhere and blocking his sight blocking his sight past the rig. But the people, his son, Kushina, Minto grit his teeth so tightly he almost tasted blood and ran for the hostages. He called out to them and looked back to him in fright as more fire started to erupt around them. He reached out for them, and everything exploded. "Hunting, how many did we lose? Don't worry, girl. Dedra, shut up and keep moving, your damn feet." Dedra growled as the Chia forces stumbled and limped their way through the forest and back to their base. Some of them stopped and looked up. "Keep moving, you dumbasses. We need to get medical attention." Dedra, Rega sighed. "Look, the area around them was suddenly basking in intense light as trees actually bended from wind pushing them back. Their hair and clothes were whipped about as they all looked up at the white airship overhead. "You are surrounded. You are under arrest. Put down all weapons and please and place your hands under your head." Are you serious? Are you fucking serious?" Data cried out. "The bad guys are going that way, you fucking morons. The White Fang are in the area and you arrested us." Several bulkheads parted away and scarred the area for the terrorist cell, but the airships remained covering over them. "Put down your weapons and place your hands above your heads." They all wanted to scream and curse and blow that fucking airship out of the sky. He wanted to pull the goddamn soldiers inside it out and push them down on their asses for thinking they were the threat to focus on. But as seconds passed, he looked around and saw his fellow vigilantes release their weapons and comply with the demands. Even Rega sent a look back at him and shook his head before laying down his sword. Dedra bit his cheek. "Shit! Hunting! Is there anything behind us? I don't see anyone. That was Atlas. Atlas was coming. But what about that human? He follows us. I can't fight him again." Han frowned as he marched through the makeshift tunnel created by their associates for them to move through undetected. His fellow White Fang followed behind him with sluggish movements and broken spirits, all except one. "So how was your fight?" Kinmaro was nearly bouncing with excitement as he walked ahead of the pack without a care in his mind. "My job went swimmingly and it was fun as hell." "Shut up. What's wrong? That you got beaten again?" "No, wait, it was different this time, right? You actually lost your aura this time. That ridiculous reserve had to be your one redeeming quality, and not even that measured up, huh? I said shut up. And two of you this time as well. You super rare messiahs of the furnace are kind of disappointing." Han was about to charge in and break the mouthy little bastard's skull before he heard a thud behind him. He looked back and saw the two men carrying her had toppled over. The whole pack stopped as Han stepped back to them. "What happened?" "Sorry, sir." One of them clutched his ribs. "It's kind of hard to breathe. The husband and Shiha got a few good hits on us, and carrying her around too was harder than we thought." He tried to lift himself back up. "Don't worry, sir. We'll get you and the madam back to the base. We promise." And now we got dead weight too. Such a shame." Kinmaro shook his head in disappointment. "Well, they're just gonna drag us down. Time to get moving, or we might actually get caught. Strong survive and all that." Han stepped up and stood over the injured forms of his followers and his fellow noble guard. He carefully bent down and placed the two men under each arm while he lifted the blonde woman over his shoulders. He turned around and stepped slowly with the extra weight he carried. Just rest for now. We'll be back to our base when you wake up. Sir, Mr. Han, stop gawking, all of you. Han commanded. Clear the path and make sure there's no Grim in our way when we make it to the tunnels. The other Faunus nodded and scouted ahead, while Kitamura looked at him with disgust. I told you, I will focus on the Faunus that stand alongside us, and I will not abandon them. Pfft, whatever. Han heard a faint chuckle from the woman over his shoulder as the spider walked away. I thought you weren't the trusting type. Guess I was wrong. Just you choose who to put your trust in. Didn't think you were awake. A fight was harder than expected. Scarier. I thought I was going to. It was your first fight. Those are the hardest. Han continued to walk in. I'll expect a better showing in the next one. Yuji told Kudo while her eyes shut. Maybe you aren't as big a dick as I thought. Hunting. The man grabbed us and jumped off the side of the rig. We were just falling until we passed through the smoke, and I saw the ground. I thought we were gone, but next moment we were in the trees. No cuts, no skewering, nothing. And where did this man go? Minto stumbled his way through the forest as he heard the last of the hostages get picked up by the Atlas soldiers. Glad to see they still had a few real individuals on those ships, while the heavy work was left to the robots. The blonde gagged and flinched from the pain as he grabbed his chest. Something was cracked or even broken. The last of his aura had finally vanished after getting all those workers off the rig. He looked back and saw the massive pillars of smoke that drifted up into the sky and darkened the clouds. He felt disappointment and anger bubbled in his chest. Atlas had arrived and hopefully they caught some of the stragglers, but he hadn't been able to stop the White Fang or the Uchiha today. He didn't know where Itachi Uchiha was holed out. He didn't know where Danzo was keeping the woman he loved. This was his golden opportunity to find what he wanted, and he failed. He heard a faint growl at his side. Mito leaned back against a tree and spotted a set of red eyes glowing in the darkness. The huntsman clicked his tongue and reached for a knife as best as he could, injured him without aura against what sounded like a big Grim. This was gonna suck. Suffer. Before the creature could pounce, there was another rustle as the Grim turned around. It let out something almost akin to a whimper as a loud bang shook the foliage and splotches of armor and black fur splattered the area. The pieces of Grim evaporated as the figure stepped out of the forest. I guess the dumb shit just couldn't be avoided, huh? Mito chuckled at the amusement in his old teacher's voice. Just like you taught me. I'd like to dispute that, but I really can't. What are you doing here? Mito watched Jiraiya kneel down in front of him and inspect his wounds. I said you didn't need to get involved. I know, and from you that's code message that says I'm going to get myself into a fight and I want to do it alone so I can get my ass kicked. So don't follow me, Jiraiya. Okay? God, I'm a big boy now. I can fuck up on my own. The frog looked up at the pillar of smoke. Guess I was a little late though. Better late than never. When I saw all that smoke, I actually got worried. Jiraiya shrugged. All of it blocking your line of sight means you couldn't teleport. If you can't see the trees or the ground through the smoke, you can't get out of time. You can't get off in time. I found a way around that. How so? I jumped off the side carrying hostages and then used teleportation the moment it was clear. Fuck. I'm reckless, but you're next level. Mito sighed. I couldn't find them, Jiraiya. She's still out there. Alone? I know, kid, and we'll find a way to her. Jiraiya gripped his shoulder. But right now, you need to get patched up. Minato flinched. Guess you're right. Know any good doctors around here? I called the best doctor I know ahead of time. From Mistral. Minato paled. Was she mad? More like livid, and she's already on her way. Appreciate this pain and suffering in between while you can. It means you're alive, because when she gets here, there will be no more pain, because your body is going to be pasted. Extra, not a spirit bomb, but as is effective. Ruby hummed a soft little tune while sitting in the library. Normally, she didn't want to be stuck in the stuffy place surrounded by books and being treated with the prospect of learning as the only form to pass the time. But luckily, she found a stack of comic books and weapons and weapon catalogs she had her eye on for some time. Plus the platter of cookies she had snuck in. It didn't occur to make this place fun. Ruby picked up a cookie and licked her lips before bringing it close. Yummy yum! Something bounced off the back of her head and made her drop her treat. A pitiful whine came to her nose. Came with her loss before she shook her head and grabbed another one. Something else bounced off her head. She tried this over and over, with each tantalizing bite of her cookie being torn away from her by something knocking on her head and distracting her. The young hunter shook in her seat before slamming her hands down and looking back. Would you guys stop throwing things at me? Sorry, Ruby, not to apologize. His head held up with an eraser in his grip. Sun, John, Neptune, Kiba, and Lee were all beside him with random bottle balls or sharpeners in their hands, ready to throw as well. But instead of looking pleased as if they were bullying the girl, they all instead looked excited and hopeful for something to happen. Don't mind us. What are you doing? You just, throwing things at the back of your head. Why? For reasons. Ruby sighed, her shoulders falling as she frowned at the boys. Guys, for the last time, my eyes are silver. That's just their color. No superpower, no ultimate form, and I can't use Ultra Instinct. You don't know that. Yeah, you just haven't pushed you far enough yet. That's right. Just a little bit more, and your eyes will glow, and heat will come off your body, and that sick music track will kick in. No music is gonna play if you keep throwing things at my head. If a song plays a singing Garo's name every time he plays a dancing game, then I bet one will play for you too. Don't give up hope. Ruby sighed as the boys continued to bounce things off her head in hope that she would unlock some crazy power. She was never going to enjoy the comics and cookies like this. Don't let it get to you, Ruby. Her big sister came over with a stack of magazines as well to join her. Yang smiled. They'll stop eventually. How do you know? Because they were trying the same thing with me. Yang said as she pulled up her hair. They said I had the energy. They had the energy and long hair of the third one, but I shouldn't. But I shouldn't still have the eyebrows. Whatever that meant. When one of them suggested I shave them off for authenticity, I punched them all through a wall. Why are the boys so stupid? No idea. They think about their favorite cartoons and try to make them a reality. Can't do anything about those delusions. Yang shrugged before reaching out for the platter. Come on, we can't enjoy these if we don't. Yang's finger hit the wrong way and knocked the whole thing off the table. The cookies went flying out as the platter toppled off the table. The cookies were perfectly caught and organized over the platter in the next instant. Everyone looked in shock at Ruby, seeing the faint shimmering heat coming off her body as her hair gently swayed from the aura around her. The girl sharply turned around to show the glow in her silver eyes that activated with the endangerment of her beloved treats. Kachi daze gungun wo muki jan. We did it! The boy cheered and embraced the joy at their success. I knew it was true. She activated it. It even has all the music and everything. It's so cool. Boys continued to celebrate the victory and clap each other on the back in joy. After a moment to calm down, they looked over and noticed Ruby was still staring at them sharply. Hey, you don't think she's still sore about us throwing things at her head, do you? Nah, it's Ruby. She's the sweetest girl ever. She'll forgive us. Wow. Blake could not hide her surprise at her young friend's sudden burst in power, or her complete decimation of the boys who unfortunately stood in her way. She saw them get thrown into bookshelves and smacked into the wall and spiked up into the ceiling without any hope of combating the new little pint-sized powerhouse. Should we try and stop him? Incredible! I had no idea she had this kind of potential. Weiss completely ignored Blake's suggestion and the boys' anguishing screams as she barely stopped herself from Julian. Imagine if we could get this kind of reaction out of her normally. We'd win the tournament for sure. We'd be the best team in history. It's all in the palm of her hand. So do you want to be the one who knocks every cookie over next time to trigger her? The hairs froze and clamped up as the fawness nodded and watched Ruby stand over her defeated enemies. Didn't think so. End of chapter 61.